Welcome to Return on Insights, the show where candid conversations with bold founders and leaders spark actionable insights for your business. I'm David Lindover.
And I'm Erin Abbotangelo. Each week, we pull back the curtain with leaders who are scaling teams and shaping the future, sharing the insights that create impact far beyond the bottom line.
Discover how high-performing companies build enduring cultures, inspire teams to think bigger, and turn vision into action. If you see storytelling as your strategic advantage, you're in the right place. Welcome to Return on Insights podcast. I'm David Lindover, your host for today's show. Our guest today is Laavanya Pari, CFO of Beforepay and Carrington Labs, two companies that are pioneering the future of ethical lending through AI technology and finance innovation. Laavanya brings a wealth of finance expertise and a passion for responsible credit solutions. She has over 2 decades of finance leadership, experience across diverse industries, and now leads the financial operations for Beforepay and Carrington Labs. She's deeply committed to using AI-driven innovation and ethical principles to transform credit decisioning and make lending fairer and more accessible. Welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, David. That was a very nice intro.
I'm glad you liked it. My first question is a personal one, more personal than usual. What motivated your shift? Excuse me, just getting over a cold. What motivated your shift from working in diverse industries into the fintech sphere, particularly around ethical lending?
Yeah, so my background, I've moved around to a couple of different industries. I spent a lot of time in shipping over within the Maersk Danish conglomerate. And after that, I went into a not-for-profit for a couple of years and more recently to a digital media company, which was, again, mission-driven. So Beforepay came from a mission-driven place as well. So that was really important to me. It originated from the founders thinking that the payday lending space was a very predatory place where people ended up in a cycle of debt. And they really wanted to put in a product that would disrupt that, would have a lower interest rate, and would stop people just taking out loan after loan and ending up in this sort of endless cycle. And that was really interesting in itself to me, that someone would come in a lending space that feels not like the best place that you want to be in, try to disrupt that with a really tech lens too. And especially what was really interesting to me was the fact that they were using the tech from Beforepay to launch Carrington Labs, which you can see I've got the T-shirt on for today. And so Carrington Labs essentially takes the credit decisioning and tech behind the Beforepay business and markets that. Predominantly, we're looking at the US at the moment, but it's really something that can be applied in many, many businesses. So I just found that so interesting and such an opportunity that even though I was pretty happy actually at my last organization, I thought I was settling in for the long haul. But when Jamie Twist, the CEO of Beforepay, contacted me, tried to get me in, knowing that I had never worked in a fintech before or this particular sort of lending space, but thinking that my commercial experience would be something that would be valuable. I just thought this is something that doesn't come up every day. And I really wanted to give it a go and see how it would go.
Very interesting. I'm happy for you. It sounds really exciting. So how does Beforepay's model challenge the traditional lending approaches to create more affordable and fair credit?
Yeah, so your traditional product will get you into this cycle of debt where it's got high interest rates, and it doesn't necessarily take into account how much income you make, and it gets you into this kind of cycle of debt where you struggle to repay the interest, and you just continue to have other lines of credit and build your debt. So Beforepay has a couple of different things that it uses, but predominantly it looks at your ability to actually repay your loan. So it considers you as, it looks at transactional data, basically from your side as an individual. It maps it out into different attributes. So it kind of uses transaction data to know who you are as a person. And it determines, can you actually pay it back? And what conditions does it need to be to get you to be able to pay it back? There's a couple of other things as well. So you can't take 2 loans at the same time. So while you've got one loan out, you need to be able to repay that to be eligible for another loan. And the other component that's really important is that we've got a 5% origination fee on our Pay Advance product. And that's significantly cheaper than anything else out there in the market. It also doesn't grow after the loan completes. So say you don't pay it back, you hit the 62-day mark where the loan finishes, it doesn't sort of grow and grow and grow in the background and cause that additional stress to the person who's taken it out. It stays flat. And when you repay it, you repay it. We also don't use any sort of techniques of going to credit bureaus, giving you a terrible score on that side, or send any sort of nasty, threatening messages to you, or get anyone chasing after you. That's not part of our principles. So if all of those sort of combined means that it's just a more ethical approach. So if someone takes out a loan with us and they're still eligible for a loan going forward, they're incredibly unlikely to go back to your traditional payday lender, because why would you? It'd be more expensive, and it's just not supporting you. So we've got a really high return user rate. It's in the 90s from a percentage perspective, just because of that reason. That's just how cheap it is. Also as a tech product, so it's very quick and easy to use. End to end, there's almost no human interaction in it. You've got your app, you go through the process, it checks your transaction data, and then you've got the money in your bank account. And that as well for people is really, really important, because when you're in a position where you need between $50 and $2,000, it's an emergency. It's something very important. And you need that right now. You don't need to be stuck in a queue for a couple of days trying to work out whether you're going to get the money or not. So that's really key to our customers too.
And so just to clarify, that's presently only available in Australia?
That's right. Yeah. So it's a domestic lending business. And as a Beforepay business, it's only available in Australia. But as Carrington Labs, where you take that tech and take that credit decisioning, which is the very complex sort of attributes and all those kind of qualities, that we've been able to take over to the US. We've signed up a couple of deals over there with very different sort of service providers. We've announced a few of those already. So there's Doc to Doc, which is a medical loan business. So again, where you don't have a lot of information about someone who's about to become a doctor, but you know that probably they're a good bet. They're going to make a bit of money in the future. It looks at them as a person, as opposed to looking at their credit file, their FICO score, which wouldn't have been developed. They probably haven't taken out any credit before, but it can build those attributes together, define them as a person, and find out whether they're going to return or not return the money. And so our default rate on our domestic business in Australia for the last year, or financial year for us, which goes up to June 2025, was 1.1%. So incredibly low. And it's been decreasing over years. So as we learn more about people, put that into our credit decisioning model, it gets more and more sophisticated over time. And it can really identify what are trigger points for people. So because it's cash flow underwriting and it's very dependent on your recent history, so it's syncing with your bank data all the time, it can tell that, okay, for years you've been a pretty good credit bet, you haven't done anything unusual, but something has happened in your life over the last month. Maybe you've been withdrawing money in the night, maybe 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. You keep withdrawing some money. It can sort of, it determines that, okay, these are triggers for a potential risk of default. And based on that, we would change your risk score. So as opposed to your kind of traditional FICO score that's set in a point of time, it just couldn't pick up that kind of information in a very live way. So being able to do that really helps our default scores. It also conversely does it the other way around, which actually is the reason that we loan out so much money and we feel this is really valuable. So if you've got a FICO score that was determined by something you did couple of years ago, you were in a bad place, you've changed what's happened. So maybe you had a bit of a gambling problem before, but that's just not the case anymore. It will look at your recent history, our sort of credit methodology, and determine that actually you're a pretty good bet right now, as opposed to the FICO score, which might look at things that you haven't repaid a very long time ago, and you won't be able to get any credit going forward. So in a lot of ways for our customers or our clients that we're looking at, lenders, they will loan out more money than they would have just using your traditional FICO score alone.
So you've pretty much answered my next question, but I'll give you the opportunity to add some detail explaining how Carrington Labs uses AI and machine learning to analyze the transaction data differently from traditional credit scoring. I think you've kind of covered most of that, but if there's anything to add, go for it, and then we'll transition to our next set of questions.
Yeah, so I'm not a data scientist, so I probably will explain this really poorly. Actually, our CEO is a data scientist, so he loves to kind of jump into this. But essentially, you've got a elasticity model in terms of the way that we do our credit decisioning. So there's two different really important points, which is how much should we loan you, and add, in order to determine whether you're going to pay it back. So it's one thing to just say, should we loan it to you? But it doesn't tell you how much. And that's very different. So if we look at our customers, if we would be able to know that, okay, if we loan them $100, there's probably 100% chance that they'll repay it, or 99% chance they'll repay it. But we know that if that goes up to $300, maybe that drops to 50%. And so we can pick the optimal point from a default perspective to make sure that we loan them the most to support them in whatever they need, but also make sure that they are able to repay it. And that's what's really different from other models too. It's not very binary. And when we move into, so at the moment we're moving into larger loans, which is above $2,000, and it goes up to, so at the moment it goes up to $3,000 over 3 months, which is different from what we've done in the past. And this becomes really important because loaning somebody $2,000 might be very different to loaning them $3,000 over 3 months. And as we start to expand the product, we'll look at $5,000 over 6 months, for example, and as we learn and learn, put more and more into the machine learning, but also into our sort of knowledge. So our data scientists coming up with all these attributes and these connections between the data that they're pulling out, it will pull out different insights. So we're really good at that credit space below $2,000. We're learning a bit. So we're very conservative in the way that we roll out our product. So our personal loan product, we haven't just sort of opened the doors and said, okay, let's take everyone in. We're picking up, we're testing out a few different things. We're saying, okay, now that we learn more and more, we're in a position to roll it out in different ways. So this year is really important for us in terms of the personal loan product on the Beforepay side. But what we can actually do, so when we look at our Carrington Labs model, we can go to clients, we can use their data. So what we'll do is we'll get their data, we'll put it into our machine learning with the outcome. So they give us a set of data, goes into the machine learnings, understands what the outcomes are, and then we say, okay, now give us some data that we don't know what the outcomes are about to be. We take those, we say, well, this is what we would have done if you had given us, if we were the ones doing the credit decisioning on that, and we compare what they did based on the FICO score. And that's really powerful for them to say, oh, okay, so you wouldn't have loaned to these people, or, you may have loaned to people, and they can really, concretely see improvements in their data, and we really back those decisions. So the Carrington Labs product is a software as a service business, so it's all based on connections with our lenders. So we're really confident that our lenders will want to put their information, have that connection set up, and get that information back, because once they start to see those results, why would they go back to something that creates higher defaults or lower approval rates?
Agreed. Sounds very interesting. So what are some of the unique challenges you face managing finance for two innovative yet distinct businesses?
Yeah, so we're a team we're very lean. We're just under 50 people at the moment. And that's us kind of growing as well. So in my role in finance, I look also after risk, and people and culture, and pretty much anything that anyone doesn't sort of naturally fall into anyone else's role. So I'm organizing the end of year party in a couple of weeks. Just jumping in wherever you can. And so with a business of this size, it's super interesting because I'm learning a lot in a lot of different areas, but also really challenging in terms of managing both those different businesses and across all those different fields. And we're also a listed business over in Australia. So that means there's a lot of additional compliance, all those rules around credit as well that I'm getting very familiar with. But from a business perspective, they're very different business models and very different ways of us assessing them. The good thing about the Carrington Labs business is that for us, we built that tech already predominantly. And so there's not much extra cost to go into that for us to do it, except for the fact that, our data scientists are learning and kind of adapting to the proof of concepts as they come through. And they're constantly evolving. So from that side, yes, but from my side in terms of managing a lending business versus managing a software as a service business, it's really just about understanding how to pool your resources, how to grow in this sustainable way. So how to make sure that we just don't throw on 20 people and start going out to all different countries and pitching to everyone we can think of. So growing sustainably is really important from my side from a finance perspective.
Same here. So how does the credit decisioning technology maintain such a low default rate? That's exceptionally low, even compared to established lending models.
Yeah, so it's that sort of default elasticity is the really important characteristic for that. So just the fact that it's learnt so much about how much we can lend and when we should be lending, and it's constantly learning. So being able to pick up that transactional history and forming attributes about you. So especially when I first started, I was so interested in myself as a person. I was like, what if I go to McDonald's a couple of times? What does that do to me? And just really understanding all of those characteristics and how they fit together. There's obviously some really important ones, things like gambling, and not necessarily just gambling. That in itself could be fine, but gambling at particular times, at particular locations, cash withdrawals is always a tough one. If we don't know what it is, you assume that it can't be great if it happens a few times in the nighttime, and also just your spending patterns. So because we are very good at knowing, okay, so you got paid at this particular time and then you spent all your money that day. All those kinds of characteristics build up who you are as a person. And even things like, okay, you're going into a tough period, you've got a few expenses coming up, and yet you spent all your money. Or maybe actually you knew it was coming, so a week before you started to cut back on your discretionary spend. That's a really good sign for us that you will be able to repay us. So us being able to put all those characteristics into this model, and having it just constantly machine learn, and grow. So like one of the questions that we often get asked is, what about macroeconomic factors and how does that impact your modeling if it's based on this data? But because it is learning as it goes, it can pick up those factors and how they relate to individuals because their behavior will change, and then our machine learning will change as well. So it's very clever in that way, and it's constantly sort of pulling together and piecing together those different attributes, and our data scientists are constantly making those connections as well, and knowing which connections are very relevant and which connections maybe are not so relevant. You can't throw sort of everything in there, but that's how in the end, you sort of wash up all of that, and we're very good at knowing who to lend to.
It's fascinating. It really is. The access to the information, real time, just amazing. So what role this relates to what we've been talking about, the role of transparency and ethics in your company's mission. I sense that's exceptionally important, as well as in your day-to-day operations. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so on a transparency side, us having this 5% origination fee and it's flat and it doesn't grow is really, it's very clear. It's very understandable to our clients. And even for our personal loan product where it has a 5% origination fee and then 1.5% per month from an interest rate perspective, that again, we just want to be very clear with our customers. We want to make sure that we look also at their income and that they can afford it. There's from our perspective, there's no point loaning it out if they can't afford it, or it puts them into a position where they then need to pull money from somewhere else. So if we're taking too much out of their pay, that they now need to get a different source of income, they need to get a credit card, like pull it out of credit card debt or something like that. That's not where we want them to be.
Right.
So there's a few things that like that are not necessarily credit decisions. Maybe they would do that and we would get paid, but that's not the position that we want to put them in from an ethical perspective. So there's definitely things that go into our credit decisioning that aren't purely financial, that have that ethical lens. And I think also just us trying to undercut everyone out there. So even with our personal loan product, as that grows, our real skill is being able to do it for cheaper than everyone else. So the fact that the process is so automated and we don't have that human intervention means that we can keep our costs low. From a, we're not necessarily growing in numbers of people in our business. We're predominantly a tech business. We're very slim in other areas, and for that reason, we can continue to really tighten on our costs, and we can pass that on and undercut a lot of our competitors over here in Australia.
Very interesting. So diametrically opposed to the lending patterns that we expect to have here in North America, right, and around the world. So I would imagine you're going to meet with some success here in North America. So how are you expanding your impact in Australia at the same time as you're preparing for international markets like the U.S.?
Yeah, so we're looking to scale up that personal loan product. So we feel like we have the right to play in that space, given our success, what our success has been. There's more. In ways, there's more risk in us going into those larger loans for longer from a debt perspective, but we feel like it's a really good place for us to lean into and an area where we could be really successful. And so for us, we'll continue to expand that as sort of works out well for us. We follow where the credit takes us. So if, as long as it makes sense for us financially, we will continue to sort of extend our lending on that side. And then for international expansion, we've been over in the US a lot. So our CEO, our CCO, and our CTO were all over in the US actually last week and the week before. So it was just me holding the fort over here. But they have spent a lot of time in the US from a market size perspective. Also, our CEO and our CCO are both Americans, so they know that market really well, and they understand how there's such a big need for it. But just the opportunity, I think also in the US, there's a lot of interest in change and being able to adapt these kind of clever solutions within businesses. So that has been really good for us in terms of having those discussions. Are at the moment we can kind of turn up to a conference, do a presentation, or meet people at a conference, and that creates enough leads for us to sort of continue the pipeline. But obviously that will probably hit a point where we need to be a bit more active in that. But for the moment, it's been you kind of have these initial conversations, and I even find as a CFO, it sells itself. So people will say, "Hang on a second, that doesn't seem like why wouldn't people do this? Why surely somebody else is doing this?" And I think that opens the doors and creates these discussions.
And nobody else in North America is doing it the way you're doing
There's
it.
there's some other providers out there. So there's that we know of, but not in the way that we have. For a start, we have the lending business as proof that it works, and nobody else has that. Has sort of 4 years of evidence to say we've been doing this. We lend our own money with it. We know it works. To be able to walk in, that's very sort of compelling to our clients, and nobody has that, and probably the level of sophistication that we've been able to go to, we have a 4-year head start on everybody else. So all this sort of learning that has gone into it from day one, you wouldn't be able to walk into. And we have this combination as well of sort of the credit decisioning, and also the understanding of the lending business that it's a unique combination. So as I sort of mentioned, our CEO, he's both sort of a data scientist, but he's worked for one of our major banks over in Australia too. So he understands how lending works. He understands you can't just do anything. You need to be compliant. You need to create this modeling that is compliant as well, and that also you need to make good credit decisions. So that's just a very sort of unique combination that you might find some tech people that think that they can create something, but it's rarely ever based on specific data like the way that ours is. Or you might find people who are creating one part of the puzzle instead of creating the overall thing that we're doing.
My last question, advice that you'd give to financial lenders seeking to balance innovation with responsibility.
Yeah, I think that especially as a CFO, that where I see the opportunity with where we're leaving essentially money out there, money on the table, is that we don't loan to people that actually have a thin credit file, don't have a good FICO score, but actually are maybe recent sort of immigrants or immigrants who predominantly deal in cash, don't have a credit score. Really great to lend to people like that, or people who just do things that don't contribute well to their FICO score, but actually good for us to lend out to. There's so much opportunity out there for innovative thinkers, and sticking to the traditional space over time, it's not sustainable. So at the moment, of course, a lot of banks are making lots of money, and so why would they change? But if you want to be ahead of the curve and you want to make sure that it's hard for competition to walk in and sort of eat your lunch, then you've got to make these changes early.
Maybe you'll force them to change eventually. Wouldn't that be nice? It's been a really interesting conversation. I know that the people who watch this podcast will feel the same way, and I hope that we get to talk to you again, Laavanya. Thank you so much for your time today, and I wish you the best.
Thanks, David. I really appreciate it.